Welcome to Spring LIB.
All right, so for this question, first, I think it's helpful to sort of visualize what's going on when this deer population has been reduced. And second of all, I think it's also important to remember that whenever you remove something from an ecosystem, there will be effects beyond the direct ones that are immediately apparent. And that's basically what this question is kind of asking, is for you to recognize that. Let's take this example. This is a deer, I promise. And this deer species eats on, the grasses and the plants in the area, and it's fed upon by or yes, predators eat them, basically. Like this is a bear, question mark. Just deers get eaten by something, pretty much. And in this equation, let's say this deer has died. So now all of these pathways of eating plants are gone. So that means that there are more plants everywhere because not just this deer is gone, but a lot of deer are gone. Now that, however, the deer are gone, this mode of getting energy, the predation, is also gone because now this bear, question mark, has no food source because all of the deer are gone. And now that this bear is gone, maybe, the bear also fed on a rabbit, and then, the rabbit species is going to live more. So this is an example of indirect causes of taking out one organism from an environment. But now that we have the sort of mostly direct consequences down, let's start thinking about what else will happen. Because as the deer is gone, there's also this other route, which is the plants. Now, as the number of plants increase, we also have soil, and these plants are taking nutrients from the soil. They might be taking a lot of them. And deer aren't going to feed off of everything in the environment. So maybe there's this tree that the leaves are, too high off the ground for them to consume. So this tree might not be immediately affected by the change in deer population. But now that all of these grasses are starting to grow and taking all of the nutrients from the soil with them, maybe this tree species isn't getting as many nutrients. So maybe that will have a detrimental effect. And then, anything that feeds off of these trees or lives in them will also have a detrimental effect on them. So this is just sort of an example of how everything happening in an ecosystem will have an effect, not just on the line after it, but the line after that, and then probably the line after that, and the line after that. So you want your answer to this question to be as complete as possible. Now that we have that down, though, this is a multiple choice question, not an essay question. So we have the benefit of narrowing these down based on which ones are not only correct, but also give us the most detail. So option A tells us to look at environmental conditions. What that means, I don't even know what that means. What does this question consider environmental conditions? Are we talking about abiotic factors? Are we talking about, this whole process here? Are we talking about the immediate effects? I don't know. This is a very vaguely worded response. So, and also environmental conditions on the whole ecosystem could take a while to respond because, as you can see, this tree of effects happens across generations and species, and it might not be immediately apparent what the full effect on the whole environment is, from the first, recording of deer hunting. Option B tells us to look at the predators, the plants they feed on, nutrients in the soil, pests too, because pests will also be feeding off of deer, and maybe when the deer are gone, maybe they'll decrease, or maybe they'll hop on, let's say, this fun little bunny, and they will affect it more than they had before. And then maybe they'll proliferate because now the bunnies are proliferating because they don't have any competition with the deer on the food, but now the pests are eating them, and it's all cause and effect. So far option B is a lot more detailed, gives us, exactly, what parts of the stage of each, line we're looking at here. So that looks like a pretty good option. But let's read on so we don't miss anything. Option C says looking at predators alone is sufficient to determine the impact of hunting. How that, while predation is like a major part of this equation, and this will be one of the most direct causes, uh, predators, because they are sort of at the top of like the energy chain, if you will, um, they tend to have lower numbers in general in any ecosystem relative to herbivores like deer. And looking at their numbers alone won't tell you, you don't know if this is just standard variation. You also don't know if a predator population is being affected by other things. Um, the deer aren't just the only things in their lives. So looking at everything that's related to the deer and then everything related to that gives you a broader scope and a better way to actually find like causal links between hunting and effects on the environment. Um, and option D tells us that looking at nutrients in the soil is all we need. Again, that one's even less causal, quote unquote, than just looking at a predator, because there are a lot of things that can happen in an ecosystem that could change nutrients in the soil. Um, so that's another, like, is this just related to the deer? Is there something else happening in the ecosystem? Is this just a natural part of, how this ecosystem changes from like season to season? Um, those are questions that could be answered, but they're a lot more difficult to answer if you're only looking at one factor. So because B gives us all of those factors, and isn't vague about, just about environmental concerns, I would say that that is our